before we get to Dan, it's interesting how things come around. 4 years ago, when I was on this stage for my last concert, Cameron did a marimba solo. So it's interesting how things are going a circle. But when I found out that this piece of music was going to be dedicated to Dan Haswell, I let Brandon know that I knew Dan very well, and he asked me if I would get some information together regarding him. I said, sure, I would do that, and I did that. And I did that because I was really good friends with Dan. We went to college together. We were in the School of Music at the same time. And we were good friends during school and for years after that. So I was honored to have the opportunity to put that together and to say a few words about my friend Dan. So there are a few things in the program, but not a lot about Dan Haswell. But he grew up on the Haswell farm, and it used to be at the location. The location was the intersection of Highway 51 and Windsor Road. The farm buildings were raised a few years ago in conjunction with the Highway 51 expansion. But many of you may remember the Haswell Arabian farm, which graced this area for many years. Dan grew up in the DeForest area, played euphonium in the band program, and he played cello as well. And he graduated from DeForest High School in 1975. He then attended UW-Madison. He graduated in 1980 with a bachelor's degree in instrumental music education. Soon after graduation, he was employed by the Marion School District, and he directed band at the high school. Although he was a fine teacher, he realized after 4 years that he had more of a passion for working on instruments than teaching instruments. So at that point, he went and earned his band instrument repair diploma from the Southeastern Technical College in Red Wing, Minnesota, and he moved back to this area again. He went back to the farm. He retrofitted one of the small buildings on the farm with all the necessary equipment, and he began repairing instruments. Many of them DeForest instruments, because he was a friend of mine, opening his own shop, and he was really skilled. He was so good. But even though he had a successful business, he decided to give that up after 3 years to work for Monet. And there is a picture in the program of him holding an instrument from Monet. Monet is a very small business that produces a very limited number of very high-quality instruments for the best musicians in the world. They're very highly sought after, very small business. Everything that Dan did, he did with skill and perfection. Dave Monet recognized that and hired him to work at his company, where Dan remained for 25 years until his death in 2013. So as you've heard, Dan was very involved in music, as a player first of all, as a teacher, as a repairman, and finally as a builder of world-class instruments. His parents, David and Rosalind, chose to honor Dan and that love of music by providing funds in Dan's memory to the DeForest middle and high school band programs. Funds donated to the high school were used in the commissioning of this piece being premiered tonight. Dan was an outgoing and caring person with a great sense of humor, an excellent musician, a perfectionist, and a friend to many who all miss him very much. He was also quite an artist, and at one point I had some old sousaphones that were at the Holm Center, which used to be the middle school, and they were terrible instruments. And I made him a deal. I said, I'll give you the valves if you make artwork for me. And so if you ever make it over to the middle school band room, you'll see some original Dan Haswell art hanging on the wall. One fun thing I did with him was getting a tractor out of the farm, out of one of the outbuildings, and crushing a sousaphone bell, which oddly enough was very enjoyable. There was no one playing the sousaphone at the time. So, Dan Haswell.
Thank you, Mark, for that lovely introduction into Daniel Haswell. At this time, I'd like to introduce to the stage our composer of this piece, Dr. Charles Young.
Well, it's an honor and privilege to be here. I've really enjoyed the entire process from beginning until end, I guess, tonight, of putting this work together with these fine musicians on stage and with Mr. Bautz. It's an honor to be asked to fulfill this commission for the Haswell family and also for such an outstanding music program. I had a unique experience back in the fall. In September, I was asked to be a resident composer up in the Boundary Waters area of northern Minnesota, some of you may know it. And actually had the opportunity to stay at Sigurd Olson's residence. Any of you may know who Sigurd Olson is. And it was a real opportunity for me to have 3 or 4 days of absolute quiet, where you could feel the quiet down to the center of your bones. And you could hear people talking a mile away across a lake. Hear every word they were saying. It was so quiet. And I was not surprised to hear that Sigurd Olson had written a book called Listening Point. So I decided that I wanted to try and make this piece about the way that the sound plays off of the cliffs and things like that up in that area, and some of the sounds of nature and some of the sounds of stillness, and that I wanted to try and bring that to this composition. So anyway, there's some surprises and there's some wonderful musicians that you will hear in different ways, maybe than you've experienced before. But I would like to just thank Mr. Bautz and everyone involved in this process. I asked them to do a lot of things beyond what they normally do, and to be patient and mature way beyond their years in this process. And they've just done an amazing job throughout all of that. So if you'd please join me in thanking them and the Haswell family for making this possible tonight, I would really appreciate it. And finally, I will leave you with echoes of wind and wilderness, and I hope that's an enjoyable experience for all of you. Thank you.